I learned the truth about the forged invoices the night before our town's public meeting, when the private investigator slid a folder across my kitchen table and told me my son had planned to take my house, my accounts, and my name by putting me in a cell. That was the first time I said it out loud. My son tried to have me jailed. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I am 68 years old, a grandfather twice over, and until this mess I believed I knew how a life should be lived. You work where you are planted, you stay long enough to grow useful, and you let the years explain you. I graduated from the university in 1980, took a clerk's chair at the Mid-Cumberland Water Authority, and never left. For decades I was the keeper of valves on paper, the accountant of gallons, the listener to midnight pipes and the early morning hush of empty streets when the reservoirs yawned in winter air. I started as a junior billing clerk and by 50 I ran the back office, the ledgers, the vendors, the contracts, the silent monthly diplomacy required to keep water flowing through the households of a county that seldom had enough money to argue with. My name is Grant. I am old enough to remember when the mainframe ate cards. I am old enough to feel the difference between an honest mistake and a hand easing into your pocket. Most of all, I am old enough to know that love is not a shield, it is a door that you must keep opening even when the house shifts around you. I live alone now in the farmhouse my wife, Nella, and I bought when our son was 6 and thought tractors were dinosaurs. Nella has been gone 4 years. The oak table bears the heat scars of 1,000 pans. On winter mornings, I still hear the sigh in the old ductwork that once warned us when the kids were awake. On spring evenings, before this started, I would sit on the back steps and count my blessings and the fireflies, which felt like the same exercise. The first letter came in April. It was printed on cheap stock and folded with careful ripples, as if someone who had never used a letter opener had done the job with a butter knife. It had no return address. Dear Grant, the typewriter said, in a font my granddaughter could have picked from a phone, you might not be aware that a vendor you use, Godspeed Outreach, does not exist. I would hate to see this become a matter for the state auditor. It included 4 invoice numbers and a sentence that rattled me like a sudden clang in a sleeping plant. The amounts are not small and the pattern is not new. I know our vendors. I know them the way a sheriff knows the smell of the jail corridor at midnight. Godspeed Outreach was not one of ours. I put the letter into my desk drawer and closed it gently. At 5, I stopped next to the framed group photograph of our staff picnic in 1997 and took a breath. Then I went back to my desk, looked up the invoice numbers, and felt the room tilt. They were in our system. They were marked paid. The purchases listed under them were vague: community hydration program support, educational outreach materials, public engagement stipends, the kind of nebulous blur that can pass through a desk if the desk is unwatched. Each was 5 figures. Each had dates that matched months when my office had been short-staffed. I ran the ledger trace. The payments had been approved under my credentials. I keep a clean office. The back door to our building sticks, and folks have to shoulder their way in. The floor is tile, old and institutional, yet if any of my team leaves with coffee rings on our reports, we start the next morning with coasters on every desk like coiled rattlesnakes. So I did what I have done for 40 years when a pipe seems to leak but the floor is dry. I closed the door, pulled the blinds, and followed the water upstream. The vendor numbers were new. The tax identification field was filled with a number that would pass a casual check. The mailing address was a box at a storefront postal center. The approvals logged under my username had happened at odd hours, 6:12 a.m. on a Sunday in November, 11:41 p.m. on a Thursday in January. My password would not allow that. Our servers lock us out overnight. which meant someone had arranged entry. I went to our general manager, Alma, a woman who knows the morale of every pump in 3 counties, and told her enough to be responsible but not enough to sink us into gossip. Her thumbnail was stained with oil. She rubbed her forehead and left a streak there like a welcome mark. "We will do this clean," she said. "We will talk to the board. We will find out." The board is 5 people who can read budgets like obituaries. They called a special session. I was invited into a room with fresh coffee, too many clipboards, and a long list of questions that began with polite air and ended with calm words weighted like lead. Was I aware of these vendors? Could I explain the authorizations at these times? Did anyone else have access to my credentials? Had I recently been the subject of any extortion attempts, blackmail threats, or unusual emails? "Someone set me up," I said, feeling the shape of the sentence in my mouth, as if it were an unfamiliar tool that might still fit the bolt. "And if you give me a week, I will tell you who." That was when the second letter arrived at my house, with a copy of the first and an ultimatum: step down quietly, and the state auditor does not need to hear. Alternatively, it can become a matter of public interest. Signed, a concerned citizen. "You need to be home more," my son, Eric, said that day, when I told him I might take a leave. He was in my kitchen at the oak table, drinking the coffee I still brew too strong. He is 43, tall and straight and crafted by years of sports and careful meals his wife makes like mosaics. He owns a landscaping business that has an office but lives in the back of his pickup. He wears nice boots to visit me and leaves them by the door so he can roam the old floorboards in socks. I used to find that endearing. I still remember the tantrums his little feet threw when he was 4 and wanted to wear boots everywhere we went. "A week," I said. "Maybe 2. I will need to go in early and stay late." He arranged his mouth into his worried son shape, the one he learned at 14 when his mother was sick and he began to practice adulthood like a part in a play. "I can help with the money if they put you on leave," he said. No need for pride. I did not tell him I still have the bonds his grandmother left me, that I live well within my means, that the closest thing I have to pride is the attention I pay to my tools. "It will be fine," I said. "I have hired someone." When I say hired, I mean I called 2 police officers who had retired with their humor intact and asked them whether anyone they knew might know more than I do about how to step backward through footsteps. They both gave me the same name, a private investigator named Tamsin Weller, who kept her office in a one-room space above a dance studio across from the courthouse. She used to be a detective in Nashville. Her voice over the phone was gravel with a ribbon threaded through it. "I am not cheap," she said. "And you are not my only client." "I am not asking you to be my only client," I replied. "I am asking you to be very good at what you do." When she came to my house for the first time, she took off her jacket and put it over the back of a chair with the care you might show an old dog. She sat with her hands flat on the table. She let me tell the story, and the only questions she asked were for dates and times. At the end, she said, "You are going to have to keep working like everything is normal, unless you get pushed. If you get pushed, you call me first, and then you call your manager." "Hear me?" "I hear you," I said. "You sound like you are about to ask whether I think you did it." "I know I did not," I said. "Do you think I did?" She studied the edge grain of the table, then my face. "You are not the first decent man who has found his name written on someone else's line," she said. "Decent men, I have also learned, lie for their children and blame themselves for their spouses. I will ask ugly questions because that is how I find ugly answers. Do we have an agreement?" I thought of my granddaughter's hair, the way she insists on brushing it herself and ends up with a crown of storm. I thought of my grandson's small hand wrapped around my index finger like a living ring. I thought of my son's boots in a tidy pair at my door. "Ask your questions," I said. "Who has been to your house this year?" "My son, Eric, and his wife, Cora, every Sunday. My neighbor, Saul, when the fence needed a third hand. Alma from work brought a casserole after I had the flu. And the propane man. Do you reuse passwords?" "I do not." "Do you store them somewhere?" I showed her the small black notebook I keep in the desk beside a pencil sharpener that looks like a train. The pages are covered in block letters no one else need read. She shook her head. "That I like," she said. She walked to my computer and studied the keyboard. "This," she added, "I do not like." "What am I looking at?" She lifted the keyboard and, with a grace I would not have thought possible for a person bending to check a chord, slid her fingernail under a small black square adhered just above my function keys. "That," she said, "is a keylogger. It records every keystroke you make." My home felt a shade colder. "How would that get here?" She looked around the room, measuring distances the way a mason measures lines. "Someone who had time," she said. "Someone who knew how old men keep good habits." "When did you last have visitors at this table?" "Sunday." I heard the word and it had a new weight. Sunday dinner. I made roast. Eric and Cora brought a salad. The children were in the living room with the puzzles. The private investigator asked for the salad bowl, and when I brought it, she peered into it as if she expected to find an answer written in olive oil. She took the keylogger with 2 fingers and slipped it into an envelope. "I will know where this was purchased by morning," she said. "And you will not use your home computer again until I say so." The next day at work, a copy of the letter popped up in the email inbox labeled Board Correspondence. The subject line was for the attention of the chairman. It was identical, except for an additional line: "It would be a shame if the state auditor discovered 24 invoices over 18 months, all approved by a man who has been there long enough to know better." Alma called me in. She closed her door with the care of a person not wanting to wake a baby. "They want you on leave," she said, her voice too hard for the gentleness of her hands. "Paid leave. And they called the auditors on their own so no one can say they did not." "I am sorry." "I am going to finish this," I said. "If there is something to finish," she said. "Grant, if there is something you need to tell me now." "Someone broke into my life," I said. "I am going to catch them." "You should know," she said, and her thumb pressed into her palm, "the email to the board was not the only one. The county paper has a copy. The state auditor's office did get a complaint, and not from us." "Who sent it?" "We do not know," she said. "It was anonymous." I walked to my desk like a man leaving a church he had built. I packed my framed picture of Nella at the reservoir on the first spring day after they installed the new intake. I packed the mug my grandchildren painted with smeared stars. I left my key card on the desk. When I put my hand on the knob to leave, a younger colleague, Elise, reached for me as if I were a stair she used and now had to watch carefully. "They will fix this," she said. "They will see sense. They will see paperwork," I said. "And paperwork is stubborn." On the way home, I went by the strip mall where the private investigator had her office. I climbed the stairs. The dance studio below thumped like a large heart. "I have news," she said the moment I stepped in. The keylogger was purchased 2 months ago using a prepaid card registered to a shell company named Godspeed Outreach. That is the same name as your vendor. The purchase was made from your home address. I closed my eyes. I did not order it. I did not say you did, she said. But the person who did wanted this to look like a sloppy old man's mistake. The delivery was signed for by E. Lowe. That is me, I said, confused. Eric. He signs for my packages sometimes if I am not home. Did you get any packages 2 months ago? A replacement filter for the well sink, I said. The package had 2 boxes inside it because I ordered filters in bulk. I remember because the children built a fort out of the cartons. The second one was light and I thought they had put in extra packing. Do you have the boxes? In the garage, I said. We walked across the lot to my truck. When we reached my garage, which still smells like the saddle soap Nella kept even after we stopped riding, we found the boxes folded neatly behind the mower, exactly as my habits predicted. The private investigator took photographs, then pointed at a rectangular glue shadow on one flap. That, she said, is where a second label was laid over a first. I will tell you tomorrow what warehouse this came from. Now we need to talk about your son. I sat down on the step to the mudroom. We low men do not cry often, we were taught to let our eyes cloud on our own time. I looked at the oil stain on the concrete where my son's truck sometimes leaked. Do not ask me to think ill of him without giving me a reason, I said. I am giving you a pattern, she said. Not a verdict. Your son has your house key. Your son signs for your packages. Your son is on the short list of people who know the rhythm of your Sunday dinners and your habit of finishing paperwork at home. He is, forgive me, also on the short list of people who benefit if you fall. Benefit how? I heard my own voice fight. She put her hand on a crate, a steadying gesture for herself, not me. I looked at court records, she said. Your son's business has 3 lawsuits in the last year. He has unsecured loans under his company and a lien on his equipment. His wife's credit cards were maxed out twice in the past 6 months and then suddenly paid off with cashier's checks. The checks were purchased by someone using a driver's license number that is a digit off from yours. I felt the house lean, the way it does in tornado weather. No, I said, to the room, to the stain on the floor, to the keys on their peg. No. Grant, she said softly. There is more. 2 weeks ago, your son and his wife visited the deed office. They asked about the process for transferring your house to a family trust. Your wife's death certificate is in the file. They have a draft power of attorney prepared for your signature. They are ready to move the property if you are removed from management of your own affairs. I am not incompetent, I said. Criminal charges can do odd things to a judge's sense of caution, she said. If the auditor finds what the board is afraid of, and the district attorney is ambitious, you could be indicted. While you are waiting for that to be resolved, someone can petition for a conservatorship for your safety and the safety of your assets. Someone, I said. A concerned son, she said. When she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time with my hands on the table as if I were waiting for my name to be called. The house was quiet. The clock in the hall does not tick the way some old clocks do. You can only hear it when you still yourself. It said 8. It said 9. Finally, I rose and took the folder I keep tucked in the pantry behind the flour and the bag of sugar, the papers that tell my life in the order of the state, deed, will, life insurance, the letters Nella wrote to me the summer we decided on this place. I started to write a list: if I go, if I cannot speak, if I am mocked in the paper and I cannot answer. It felt like throwing my rings into a river. The next day, the private investigator returned with a smile like a blade. "We are going to make the truth plain," she said. "And we are going to do it in a way that means it cannot be whispered away." "How?" I asked. She set the folder down. "A public meeting," she said. "Not at your house. Not at your office. We will ask the board to hold a special open forum to address concerns about transparency. We will invite the county paper. We will ask the district attorney's office to send a representative. And before that day, we are going to collect every scrap of paper this scheme left behind and arrange it in a line that a farmer could follow in the dark. A farmer's line, fence to fence, tree to post, stone to stream. I know that line." I nodded. "Tell me what to do." For a week, we worked the way men in flood counties do, not in panic, but with a speed that knows what rages downstream. She traced the Godspeed Outreach Shell Company through a post office box paid with cash from an ATM where a security camera recorded a man in a hat I had bought my son for his birthday. She found the prepaid cards purchased with a mobile app registered to a burner phone that had a number in common with one used to call my granddaughter's school. She discovered that 2 of the invoices had originated at a coffee shop near my son's office, drafted on a laptop whose network name matched my daughter-in-law's Instagram handle. She showed me bank transfers layered with an accountant's love of symmetry. Funds went from the Water Authority to Godspeed, then from Godspeed to a series of vendors with names like Many Oaks Solutions and ELC Diversified, and then doubled back into my son's business operating account as Landscape Consulting. The part that made me grip the edge of my chair was smaller, a photograph of my desk at work taken from the doorway the week of Thanksgiving. Someone had been in my office when I was away. The shades were half closed. My jacket was on the back of the chair. I used to keep the lights low at closing time, a habit from the days when we worried about the electricity bill like it was a personal offense. In the photograph, the glow of my monitor lit the papers on my desk as if they were underwater. And there, on the corner by the plant Elise kept alive against all odds, was a paper with my username and a one-time access code, the code we use when the server resets a password and calls your desk phone with a PIN. How did they have that? I whispered. They called the help desk at 8:57 on a day when you were at the dentist, the investigator said. They gave your personal details and asked for a reset. The help desk texted the confirmation code to your phone. I do not text. Your phone forwarded the message to your email, because the settings were changed 2 months ago. And your home computer was keylogged. They had the code, and they had your password, and they did not need your phone. My anger, when it came, was not fire. It was weight. It pressed behind my eyes and made my jaw ache. All that week I carried it like a sack of sod, ungainly but necessary. I slept little. When I did sleep, I dreamed of water running uphill. I kept my routines for the neighbor's sake. I waved to Saul. I watered the beds out front. If I had not, I think I would have disappeared like a man who wanders into a field and never returns. On Saturday, my son pulled into the drive in his truck that sounds like an animal clearing its throat. He stepped out, his smile wide and slow, his hands in his pockets. I talked to a lawyer, he said, standing in my kitchen while the kettle strained to be helpful. He says it is best if we get ahead of this. You should transfer the house to a trust. We can manage your affairs until this nonsense blows over. It will make the court confident you are being responsible. I looked at him the way a surveyor looks at the verge where the field meets the ditch. Cora came in behind him, her hair in a knot that seemed to float above her head, her eyes scanning the counters as if cabinets might confess to her. She is capable. She can make a list of 10 very specific things in the time it takes most people to think up the first one. I remember when he met her, she sat across my table at 27 and asked me questions about my pension plan as if she were measuring the foundation of a house she was not sure would be sound. I chose to take that as prudence. Watching her now, I felt like a man who had painted over mold. "We will do what is right," I said. "We will do it in public." "In public?" She raised her eyebrows. "Grant, that sounds humiliating. Think of your reputation." I thought of the letters. I thought of the vendors with names that sounded like hymnals turned into businesses. "It will be a good day for reputations," I said. When they left, the private investigator rolled up to the curb and sat for a moment in her car. She had a habit of reading through a windshield as if windows, like papers, might contain footnotes. "They are confident," she said when she stepped inside. "That works for us." The board agreed to the open forum more quickly than I expected. Alma's hand was in that. She is good at reminding people that water is the only public service other than fire suppression that stands between civilization and something else. The notice went into the paper and up on the authorities' door. The district attorney's office said they would not comment on ongoing matters but would attend to listen. The county paper assigned its most skeptical reporter, a woman who has made politicians in this county blush with 3 syllables. That Sunday, my grandchildren came for dinner. The investigator suggested replacing Sunday roast with takeout because takeout leaves fewer opportunities for someone to decide your computer looks lonely. We ate fried chicken on paper plates in the backyard under the ash tree Nella planted our first year here. My granddaughter fell asleep confusing the cat with a pillow. My grandson, who is 6, told me a story about how his class had planted beans and the beans had sprouted in cups like hands reaching up to be chosen. Eric and Cora held hands and watched me with faces arranged into versions of concern. It was like watching actors in a play about a family, and I wished so fiercely that we were ordinary that my throat hurt. "Grandad," my grandson asked, "do you know what fraud is?" "Mrs. Weller says fraud is a new vocabulary word." Cora's cup paused halfway to her mouth. Eric's hand tightened around the drumstick as if he were about to ring a bird. I set my chicken down. "Fraud is when someone lies to get money that is not theirs," I said. "It is when the world nudges the scales and then says it never touched them." "Do you do that?" he asked, in the innocent gaze that has examined ants and clouds with equal seriousness. "No," I said. "And neither do you." When they left, the private investigator, who had sat in the house pretending to call her sister while watching the yard through the screen door, stepped out. "You did well," she said. "I told a child I do not lie," I said, which felt like making an oath while standing on a raft. The day of the public meeting was a Thursday. I dressed slowly. I shaved with a real blade. I put on the suit I had worn to my wife's funeral and to the retirement party for the man who taught me how to read a flow meter. I tucked a small photograph of Nella into my pocket. The private investigator arrived in a slate dress that made her look like a verdict. She carried 3 hard-sided cases and a stack of foam boards covered in charts. "We are not going to accuse anyone by name," she said, "until the last 5 minutes. Before that, we are going to show the water, and we are going to let the water show us." The community room at the authority building smells always of coffee and plastic chairs. The board sat in a row as if they were a sail filled with a complicated wind. Alma stood at the side with her arms at her back. The reporter took the end of the second row and pulled her pen like a sword. People I have known for years came in quietly and sat with their hands folded. Mrs. Garner from the diner with the homemade biscuits, whose water line runs under the sidewalk and freezes every other winter. Henry, the mechanic who never overcharges the way some do when they see a man with slow speech and fast hands. My neighbor Saul with his hat in his hands. My son and his wife, dressed like Sunday, their faces sober. The chairman opened the meeting and talked about transparency. Then he nodded to me. I stood. My voice shook at the start. I have spoken at 100 audits and 200 budget sessions. I have made speeches in parking lots about the new meters we were installing and why they would be good in the long run. I have explained rate increases to people who think you can wish water into pipes. But this was different. This was me. Thank you, I said. There is a rumor that I have been stealing through a vendor that does not exist. There is paperwork that appears to show that rumor is true. The paperwork is convincing. The dates are plausible. The amounts are large enough to satisfy anyone who wants a villain. I will walk you through what actually happened. The investigator rolled up a projection screen. We began to show the flow of money. The charts were clean. The lines were simple. The names were arranged in a sequence that would please a schoolteacher. We showed how Godspeed Outreach had been created, not the way proper nonprofits are born, with mission statements and bylaws, but in a blink, a paper registered by a person who filed 18 other such papers that month for names like Chosen River Pathways and Open Hands Logistics. We showed the box at the postal center, the prepaid card, the purchase of the keylogger, the filter order with the doubled label to hide an extra box delivered on the same day. We showed the text forwarding on my phone account switched on and then switched off the week after the first invoice ran. At this point, you could feel the room lean forward. People in small towns are not dumb. They are busy. Once you give them the line, they follow. We showed the burner phone number that had called my computer to test access and then called my granddaughter's school the next day at noon, the time my daughter-in-law usually picks up. We showed the hat in the ATM camera footage, and I can tell you there is no harm in a hat in itself, but when I saw my son's gift on the head of a man whose bank stub led to a shell company that led to a transfer that led back to my son's business account, I had to find a place inside me that could separate proof from love. The investigator kept her tone flat. She used words like chronological, verified, and ledger. She did not say the names until she had to. Who did this? The reporter asked finally, when the room felt like a held breath. The investigator looked at the board. The chairman looked at me. I nodded. She put up the last board. It was a tree, the kind tech people like because it makes their work look organic. At the root was the Water Authority. The first branch was Godspeed Outreach, a box and a prepaid card and an email address created at 2:42 a.m. on a Sunday from a house on Rutledge Road in a neighborhood where my son and his wife live. The branch split into 5 arms: Many Oaks Solutions, ELC Diversified, a consulting company established by my daughter-in-law last winter and dissolved in silence in July, the bank accounts, the cashier's checks, the landscape operating account. One limb reached back across to a draft document pulled from the deed office's public file, a photograph of a proposed trust with my name as settlor, my son as trustee, and Cora as successor. The proposed date of signing was the Friday after my leave began. The names were printed clearly. The dates were in red. No one spoke for the space of 2 or 3 heartbeats. Then there was a rustle, the sound of people adjusting their coats, a cough, the squeal of a chair. Alma closed her eyes and then opened them and folded her hands tighter. My son stood up. His face changed from one shape to another, a sequence I have seen since he was 6 and learned that lying is an art that changes the subject. The first shape was outrage. Then came woundedness. Finally, he found bewilderment. "Dad," he said, looking at me and not the room, "what is this? How could you let these people say this?" The county reporter did not look at him. She looked at the private investigator. The burner phone. "Found in a trash receptacle outside a gym on the same road where the Lowe's live," she said, clicking the slide to show a picture of the phone cracked and small as a vulnerability. 2 partial prints on the battery cover matched the prints on the filter box in Mr. Lowe's garage. Those prints, in turn, match a set taken at the deed office counter when someone handled a plastic divider too hard and left their thumb. Cora tugged at her sleeve. For a moment, her composed mouth faltered into a wobble that would make a kinderman and me want to bring her water. Then she regained it. "All of this is circumstantial," she said. "Anyone can pick up a phone. Anyone can sign for a package. Anyone can build a chart." The district attorney's representative cleared his throat. "It is not my place today to discuss charges," he said, as if he enjoyed every consonant. "But I am here. And I am taking notes. I could have let the board manage the rest." The investigator had done her work. The room had heard. But I had to say something in the language I know, to make the line visible. I put my hands on the table in front of me. My wedding ring made a soft sound against the wood. "Son," I said, very quietly, because I wanted only him to hear, "you have been stealing in a way that made it look like I was stealing. And now you have been caught." He did not answer me. He turned to the board. "You cannot trust this," he said. "You have known me a long time. My dad has been confused for months. He asked me last week whether it was Wednesday when it was Sunday. He needed help with his bills all spring. He asked me to set up a trust for him. I laughed then. It came out wrong, a little wild, the sound of a pipe suddenly releasing air. I asked you to bring me the ladder," I said. "I asked you to turn the soil in the garden because my shoulder ached. I did not ask you to put a hand in my pocket." The board took a recess. People stood and spoke in small, low circles the way people do at wakes. The district attorney went into a side room and made a call. The reporter bent over her pad and wrote like a woman lighting a fuse. My neighbor Saul stood next to me and put his hand on my shoulder for a long time without speaking. It felt like someone had set a weight on me that I could carry. When the board returned, the chairman's face had taken on the pallor of a man who knows his afternoon will be historic. He read a motion, to request a full audit by an outside firm, to suspend reimbursements pending that audit, to refer all findings to the district attorney. He mentioned me only to say that I should remain on leave and that the board would not speculate on any individual's guilt or innocence. He spoke carefully. He is a careful man. Before the meeting adjourned, someone from the back of the room asked to speak. It was Mrs. Garner from the diner. She is small and fierce and calls every man under 70 young man. She looked at my son and said, in a voice that could slice cornbread, "You were the one who smiled at me when you were 5 and asked whether you could have another biscuit if you said please. I gave you 2. You owe this town an apology." Cora put her hand through my son's arm so tightly her knuckles whitened. "This is not the place," she said. The district attorney's representative nodded at a deputy I had not noticed. The deputy stepped forward and spoke to my son and then to my daughter-in-law. Calm. Polite. Formal. The room chose to file out, because small towns do not like to watch an arrest, even one that feels earned. We prefer to know and not to stare. I sat for a minute after, watching the chairs return to their stacks. The private investigator came to stand next to me. "I am sorry," she said. "That it had to be this. I am sorry, I said. That it was. The county paper ran the story the next day. The headline used my name and the word betrayal. The subhead mentioned shell companies and a whistleblower letter, which is not a letter but a rat's nest of wrong intentions. The comments online were full of people who have never met me but know a pattern when they see one. My phone did not stop. People called to ask whether I was all right. I said I was. I said that because that is what you say. Alma called at dusk to tell me the auditors were setting up on Monday and asked whether I wanted her to bring lasagna, which is code for we are still us. I said yes, please, and I meant it. The children did not come on Sunday. My son's lawyer called instead. He was smooth. He suggested that I consider the effect of a prosecution on my grandchildren. He suggested that families have battles that should be kept at the level of kitchens and not courts. He suggested that if I allowed this to resolve quietly, there might be a way to minimize reputational damage. You mean, I said, I should make my name clean in private. I think you should avoid the mess of a trial, he said. I put the phone down. The district attorney called 2 days later to tell me that charges have been filed: fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, computer trespass, identity theft. There were words for the way my son had dressed himself in my clothes to walk behind me and collect purses. There were words that would live in the roll call of the courthouse. The arraignment would be public. He did not need me to be there. He did not need my permission. For a week, I walked around my house and touched the things my son has touched. The banister, the window latch, the top of the doorframe where he scrabbled at 8 to measure his growth. He is still my child. People tell you that parenthood changes you once. That is not true. It changes you every time your child does something you did not foresee. It changes you when they speak and when they lie. It changes you when they are 10 and burning with a fever at 3 in the morning and you sing them back into their skin, and it changes you when they are 43 and a deputy walks them out of a public meeting. I did not go to the arraignment. I sat on the back steps and listened to the distant hum of the county. I watered the herbs because they are the sort of plant that insist on now. I looked at the field and at the ditch where it rained itself into darkness. I am not a man who forgives easily. I am also not a man who hates long. My daughter-in-law came by once after that without calling. She stood in the doorway and held herself like a person who has been told she is charmless but believes otherwise. I did not grow up with any of this, she said, gesturing vaguely at my pots and the photograph of Nella and the quilts folded like patience in the wicker basket. Do you understand? I had to make every bit of good I have. Eric asked for more. He always asks for more. I told him this was too much. You were there, I said. She lifted her chin. I was not the driver, she said. I was the navigator. The car went where you pointed, I said. It took a summer for the auditors to do their work. It took less than an hour for the board to meet in public again and accept their report. It took months for the case to curdle toward a trial that never happened. Eric pleaded to a lesser charge than charged. So did Cora. They saved the court's time and saved themselves a little shame and put the rest on me, who did not relax even when it would have been in my interest to do so. People expect a tidy ending. They watch stories on screens where the credits roll and the sound swells. Life is not like that. It is a pump that keeps pushing. There are mornings when the house is quiet and you have only your hands to count. There are afternoons when a neighbor leaves a casserole and you need to learn how to say thank you without saying rescue me. There are evenings when you sit on the back steps and watch your cat hunt nothing in particular and you consider the sky with its gift for being both ordinary and extravagant. In the fall, the board voted to reinstate me with apology. I declined. It was not punishment. It was the truth. I had given the authority my spine and the good years of my attention. I did not want to go back into a place where my name had been a question mark for a season. I retired in a small ceremony in a conference room with coffee in a new pot and a cake Mrs. Garner made with her frosting that feels like an old hymn, steady, sweet, exact. Alma hugged me hard and put a wrench into my hand wrapped with a ribbon. For remembering how to fix what can be fixed, she said. I spend my mornings now walking the line fence to fence, keeping the edges of my life neat. I volunteer at the elementary school once a week to read to the children who lose their place on the page and need a hand to hold the line for them. I go to the authority on Tuesdays to sit with Elise for an hour and make sure the new person understands the humor of the old software so she will not be afraid of it. The auditor installed a system that requires 3 people to approve anything. It puts a seatbelt on the checkbook. Sometimes I see my grandchildren. Their mother brings them, and their faces are bright and careful, the way you look when you do not want to surprise a wild animal. We read books. We make lemonade. I do not speak of courtrooms or charts. They are children. They get to be children. When they leave, there is a hollow where their voices resounded like jubilation, and I remember that hollows are also shapes, and shapes can be lived with. I have not forgiven my son. I say this not with pride, but with accuracy. Forgiveness is a craft I have not learned. I have learned a different craft, not letting bitterness flood the whole garden. I have learned that love, like water, takes the shape of the vessel it is poured into. I am making a vessel that can hold memory without spillage. On the day the county paper ran the feature about fraud prevention at public agencies, the reporter called to ask whether I had anything to add. I said I did. I said, if you work somewhere long enough, you will be mistaken for furniture. Do not be. Move your chair an inch every day so people see you are alive. Lock your passwords in your head or in a book your hands alone know. Do not believe that a shared last name is a padlock. Do not be ashamed to ask for a second pair of eyes. If someone tries to turn your life into their cover story, make them read it aloud in public. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list of what I have. It is an old habit. I do not write dollars. I write nouns. I wrote, 2 hands, 1 good back, a house with a roof that might last another winter if I keep the gutters honest, an oak table that holds old burn marks like medals, a photograph of a reservoir where the water is moving still, 2 grandchildren who will one day ask for the story when they are ready, a neighbor who leans his hat against his chest when he prays, the private investigator's business card which I keep in the drawer with the pencil sharpener that looks like a train. I wrote, mistakes that belong to other people and griefs that belong to me. I wrote, a line from the back steps to the field to the ditch to the road to the sky. I wrote, the ability to see the line, which is not as common as we think. On Sunday, I made roast again. The house held the smell like a held breath. I ate alone at the oak table. I thought of Nella and the way she would make me feel brave by telling me I was ordinary. When the dishes were washed and the evening came down to rest, I walked out back and sat with the map of my fields folded inside my head. The private investigator had sent me one final note after the case closed, written in neat block letters on a card that smelled faintly of cigarette smoke from someone else's pocket. It said, "You told the truth. You did it where it counts. That is the work." There are unavoidable situations in life. There are storms you cannot outrun. There are rivers that rise after midnight, and there are weeks when your name is a rumor. There are also doors you can open, even when your hands shake. There are lists you can write. There are children whose vocabularies include the word fraud and, because of you, the words repair and community. There are evenings when the air is so clean under the ash tree that you can hear the sound of the water in the pipes under your yard, and you can tell, by the small regular tremor of it, that somewhere in this county a sink has just been turned off by a hand you will never meet. I sleep now the way honest people sleep after a harvest, not peacefully, because the next season is always coming, but with the contentment of someone who has taken the right measure. When I wake, I put on my boots, and I go outside, and I walk the fence, and I count the posts. I have a house. I have a name. I have a story that begins in one job and ends not in punishment or triumph, but in clarity. This is the work, too. This is how you live with the things that do not change and the things that did.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to the story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.